The Avatar universe has a vast and complex history that spans millennia. From the creation of the Avatar to Aang and Korra's well-documented adventures, here's the entire Avatar The Last Airbender timeline as we know it. Roughly 10,000 years before the start of Avatar The Last Airbender, the world was a misty wonderland of spirits, humans, and lion turtles, the last of whom were tasked with protecting humanity. It was on their mammoth shells that humans huddled together, venturing into the spirit wilds beyond only when necessary. To protect them on those occasional journeys, the lion turtles granted humans the power of bending for the duration of their time in the wilds. The system was broken, however, when a human named Wan used fire bending for selfish ends and was banished to the wilds as punishment. While in exile, he encountered Rava, the primordial spirit of light and peace, and Vatu, the spirit of darkness and chaos. After being tricked into freeing Vatu, Wan merged with Rava in an effort to undo his mistake and keep Vatu from flooding the world with malice. Together, they succeeded. Their bond was made permanent, and Wan became the very first Avatar. Wan then sealed off the portals that linked the spirit and the human worlds, creating the foundations for the world of Avatar as we know it. He spent the rest of his life working to protect the balance he and Rava built, and upon his death, the spirit transferred her powers to another human, beginning the Avatar cycle. Thousands of years passed between the era of Wan and that of Avatar The Last Airbender's heroes, in which the four nations coalesced into their familiar shapes. The Water Tribe, originally concentrated in the North Pole, split into two nations, with a splintered third settling in the Foggy Swamp. Centuries of tribal warfare, fortress building, and subterranean exploration created the Earth Kingdom, which was united under a single monarch. The Sun Warriors, who would go on to teach Aang and Zuko the dancing dragon form, grew, declined, and finally settled into the obscure existence glimpsed in the Firebending Masters. The archipelago that would become the Fire Nation at large, however, was brought together during the Unification Wars. In the midst of this upheaval, bending, once possible only through the volition of the lion turtles, was refined. Firebenders learned through observing dragons, waterbenders through studying the tidal pole of the moon, airbenders through their bonds with the sky bison, and earthbenders through the tunneling of badger moles.
The legends say the moon was the first waterbender. Our ancestors saw how it pushed and pulled the tides and learned how to do it themselves.
Forms, disciplines, and styles were created, explored, and advanced, from lightning generation to literal flight in the case of the legendary guru Lahima and eventually his admirer Zahir. Though many years of this era were heavy with warfare and famine, they were also bursting with exploration, adventure, and spirituality. One of the earliest avatars we know anything about is the air nomad Yangchen. This airbender was born sometime after 400 BG, or before the genocide of the air nomads, and died in 345 BG. When she was very young, a political scandal known as the Platinum Affair created a period of isolationism between the four kingdoms. In the aftermath, a group of merchants known as the Shangs were put in charge of the only cities open to international trade. It was in one of these cities that Yangchen discovered the Shang merchants' plot to overthrow the Earth Kingdom, Fire Nation, and Water Tribe all at once. In order to stop this operation, known as the Unanimity Project, the Avatar had to face off against 3 combustion benders. Her political actions led to an era of great peace between the kingdoms. However, Yangchen's fatal flaw was being overly trusting of humanity, allowing them to destroy the physical world. This led to an influx of dark spirits in the time of the next Avatar, Kuruk. The 3rd and 4th novels in the chronicles of the Avatar book series, The Dawn of Yangchen and The Legacy of Yangchen, respectively, detailed this Avatar's coming-of-age and ruling era. 300 years before the events of Avatar The Last Airbender, Avatar Kyoshi rose to power. Though she would become a formidable enforcer of justice, she was born to an infamous pair of criminals who left her in the care of strangers who then abandoned her on the streets to starve. Years of deprivation, study, and conflict ensued, molding Kyoshi into an avatar as celebrated as she was feared. Her most well-known exploits happened later in her reign. The first was the creation of Kyoshi Island, and the second was the founding of the Earth King capital Ba Sing Se's cultural authority, the Dai Li. The creation of Kyoshi Island, in which she bent the earth down to its magma to split off the tip of a peninsula and make it an island, was done to keep the village located there safe from the fearsome conqueror Qin. The creation of the Dai Li was in response to a peasant uprising and would go on to be seen as one of Kyoshi's greatest mistakes. She was a complicated figure and left her legacy up for debate from all corners. However, there is no disputing the massive effect she had upon our heroes centuries after her death.
I offer you this wisdom, Aang. Only justice will bring peace.
Her legacy is recorded in the first 2 chronicles of the Avatar books, The Rise of Kyoshi and The Shadow of Kyoshi. When Kyoshi's long life finally came to a close, Avatar Roku was born a noble son of the Fire Nation. Growing up beside Sozin, his best friend and heir to the Fire Nation throne, his life was largely untroubled until he was revealed as the Avatar at the age of 16. Years of training ensued, during which Sozin became Fire Lord. Despite their separate paths, the two remained as close as brothers. They reunited, reconnected, and when the time came for Roku to marry, it was Sozin who acted as best man. However, Sozin's ambitions had grown with every passing year. At the wedding, he revealed his plans for world conquest to Roku, much to the Avatar's horror. The two split, passing decades without contact, and without Roku's knowledge, Sozin began his conquest. However, when the volcano crowning Roku's island home erupted, Sozin did rush to his friend's aid, only to let him die in the ashes upon realizing that Roku's death would allow him to carry out his vision of global conquest.
Please.
Without you, all my plans are suddenly possible.
Hundreds of miles away, a boy named Aang was born in the Southern Air Temple, heedless of the Fire Lord's intentions and the mess they would make of his childhood. The years between Roku's death and Sozin's destruction of the air nomads were, from Aang's point of view, peaceful. An eager student, he mastered airbending with enthusiasm and an innovative spirit, topping off his years of study with the invention of the air scooter. Raised by monk Gyatso, Aang grew up playing games with his friends in a gentle period brought to a brutal end when the temple's elders, fearful of global unrest, told Aang of his avatar destiny years before they were meant to. Overwhelmed, Aang ran off alongside Appa, his bonded bison, only to be thrown into the midst of a violent storm. Terrified, Aang went into the Avatar state, encasing himself and Appa within a massive iceberg for 100 years. With Aang missing, there was no Avatar to confront Fire Lord Sozin when he harnessed the power of the Great Comet, which was later renamed Sozin's Comet, to deliver a devastating first strike in the 100-Year War. Aware the next Avatar was born an air nomad, Sozin opted to destroy their population entirely. However, as Sozin would later write in his last testament, for all this slaughter, he failed to capture the Avatar.
I know he's hiding out there somewhere. The Fire Nation's greatest threat. The Last Airbender.
Aang proceeded to spend 100 years in the ice, leaving the world without an Avatar in its time of greatest need. Fire Lord Azulon succeeded Sozin, continuing his campaign of conquest with bloodthirsty zeal. The Southern Water Tribe was devastated during these years. The Fire Nations subjected them to decades of violent raids in which soldiers kidnapped their waterbenders and destroyed their central city. One of these attacks would eventually claim the life of Kaya, Katara, and Sokka's mother. The Fire Nation's attempts to destroy the Earth Kingdom went less smoothly. Though enormous swaths of the nation were decimated and put under Fire Nation control, Ba Sing Se resisted capture. General Iroh, Crown Prince of the Fire Nation, had received a vision in his youth of himself conquering Ba Sing Se. Empowered by this prophecy, he laid siege to the city's outermost wall with all the might of the Fire Nation army behind him. During the siege of Ba Sing Se, General Iroh received word that his son had died in combat. Devastated, Iroh took stock of his battered army and his own demoralization. After 600 days, the siege was brought to an end, the Fire Nation withdrew, and Ba Sing Se was left unconquered. Ozai, Iroh's younger brother, sensed an opportunity to advance his own position amid this tragedy. As Iroh was returning to the Fire Nation in disgrace and lacking an heir, Ozai suggested that their father, Fire Lord Azulon, establish him as the heir to their throne. Azulon was outraged and commanded Ozai to murder his firstborn son, Zuko, in penance. Ursa, Zuko's mother and Ozai's wife, conspired with her husband in a desperate attempt to save her son, concocting a poison which killed Azulon in his sleep. Ozai was crowned Fire Lord, but Ursa was banished. In a few short years, Fire Lord Ozai would punish his son for speaking out of turn in his war room by facing him in a public duel, permanently scarring his face.
You will learn respect, and suffering will be your teacher.
He then sent Zuko on what he believed to be a fruitless search for the Avatar alongside his uncle Iroh. Ozai's power was cemented, and all who threatened his rule were now expunged. When Aang was finally woken from his century-long slumber, it wasn't by the Fire Nation forces, but by Katara, the last waterbender in the Southern Water Tribe, and her brother Sokka. Aang emerged onto a world utterly unlike the one he had left, but he soon learned he carried even more responsibility on his shoulders than he had before running away. When Katara showed him a captured Fire Nation ship that had been trapped near their village, Aang reeled in confusion. He'd thought he was only in the ice for a week at most, but Katara realized that he had been frozen for 100 years.
The war is a century old. You don't know about it because, somehow, you were in there that whole time.
The four nations were in turmoil, and his absence was partially at fault for it. It's at this point that Avatar: The Last Airbender began. Aang would go on to learn of his people's obliteration, the Fire Nation's dominance, and the tragic effects the war has had on even the most remote places. It wasn't long before the Fire Nation's Prince Zuko became aware of the Avatar's presence. Aang surrendered himself to Zuko to protect the Southern Water Tribe, but Katara and Sokka teamed up with Appa to rescue their new friend. Once they narrowly escaped, the trio headed north. They first visited the Southern Air Temple, where Aang realized the dark truth that he was the last Airbender. On the winter solstice, Aang received a message from a previous incarnation of himself, Avatar Roku. He then told Aang that he only has until Sozin's comet returns to learn all 4 elements and become a master of bending. Otherwise, the comet would make Fire Lord Ozai and his army's firebending powers much too strong, giving him the final edge he needed to win the war. As Team Avatar found their way to the Northern Water Tribe, it turned out the Fire Nation's Admiral Zhao was not far behind. It wasn't very long into Aang's waterbending training that the Fire Nation's armada began its siege. Zhao's real intention, however, was not to destroy the Northern Water Tribe, but to kill the moon spirit Tui, whose physical form was a koi fish in a pond located in the city. While the Avatar was distracted, Zhao captured and killed Tui, causing a lunar eclipse that made all waterbenders lose their powers. In order to drive the Fire Nation out, Aang went into the Avatar state and merged with the ocean spirit La to become a giant spirit fish that defeated the invading army. After Zhao captured the moon spirit, Yue, the princess of the Northern Water Tribe, revealed that she had been saved by the moon as a baby. As Aang defeated the army, Yue repaid the favor by sacrificing herself to give life to the moon spirit. On the second leg of Aang's journey to becoming the Avatar, he and his friends traveled to Omashu to find King Bumi, who was intended to teach Aang earthbending. On their way to the southwestern Earth Kingdom city, they learned more about the Avatar state. Namely, if Aang was to die while in the Avatar state, the cycle of reincarnation would cease. Once they arrived, they found Bumi captured by Zuko's sister Azula. After being rescued, Bumi refused to teach Aang and instead told him to find a very specific kind of teacher.
Your teacher will be someone who has mastered neutral Jing. You need to find someone who waits and listens before striking.
That teacher ended up being Toph Beifong, a blind earthbender who used her power to sense vibrations in place of vision. The child of a wealthy family, Toph's abilities were being held back by her overprotective parents. Once she realized they would never change, Toph left her family behind to join Team Avatar and teach Aang the secrets of the Earth. Aang and Team Avatar were pursued by Azula and her team of firebenders until they reached the library of Wan Shi Tong in the Siwang Desert. Here, Sokka found a document that taught him about an upcoming solar eclipse that could give the other kingdoms an opportunity to strike against the Fire Nation. However, before they can act on this information, Appa gets captured, prompting Team Avatar to go to Ba Sing Se to hopefully find him. At the time, the city was ruled in the shadows by Long Feng and the Dai Li, who had turned into a secret police force since they were first established by Kyoshi. It was through Long Feng's manipulation that the Earth King was kept in the dark about the ongoing war outside the city. When Aang arrived, Ba Sing Se was a so-called utopia, free from war, but beneath the surface, it was being run like a tyrannical police state. Team Avatar wound up exposing Long Feng and sending him to jail, which secretly played into Azula's master plan. By that time, the city was ripe for a coup, and Azula and her Fire Nation allies quickly infiltrated it to begin one. During the coup of Ba Sing Se, Team Avatar went head-to-head with Azula and nearly lost everything in the process. While attempting to warn the king of the coup, Sokka and Toph run into Azula and her friends, who defeat them. While Sokka and Toph are occupied, Katara and Zuko wind up imprisoned in a cave together, where the two briefly bond over the loss of their mothers before Aang and Iroh find them. Shortly after, Azula arrives with the Dai Li and convinces Zuko to join her and attack our heroes. In the desperation of battle, Aang decided the only way to win was to go into the Avatar state. Once he transformed, however, he was struck by Azula's lightning and came out of the fight mortally wounded. It looked like Aang was going to die, and much worse, the Avatar cycle was going to be broken. However, Katara was a trained healer and had been given water from the spirit oasis at the Northern Water Tribe by her waterbending master. In a last-ditch attempt at saving her friend, she used it to revive Aang and preserve the Avatar cycle. Many Avatar The Last Airbender fans agree that the third season of the show is the best, and one of the major reasons it has this reputation is Zuko's redemption arc. By the end of their time in Ba Sing Se, Aang is widely believed to be dead, Iroh had been imprisoned as a traitor, and Zuko was welcomed back to the Fire Nation as a hero. After returning to his old life, however, Zuko became unsettled and increasingly convinced that Aang was still alive somehow. Hoping no one in his family finds out, he hired an assassin to find Team Avatar. He then learned that Avatar Roku was his mother's grandfather, shocking him and setting his character up for a major redemptive turn. After sitting at his father's right hand at a war meeting, Zuko realized his life's dreams of living up to his father's expectations were no longer relevant. In a revealing conversation with Ozai, Zuko made his new allegiance clear and his father attacked him.
I'm going to join the Avatar, and I'm going to help him defeat you.
After escaping, Zuko went to track down Aang at the Western Air Temple. After some initial conflict, the group accepted him as Aang's firebending teacher with skepticism. Eventually, he proved to be an excellent master and one of Aang's best friends. Although Aang didn't feel quite ready for the arrival of Sozin's comet, the Fire Nation was. It seemed all hope was lost, but before dueling Ozai, Aang made one final pit stop. During this time, Aang met with a lion turtle who taught him one final avatar technique, the secrets of energy bending. The duel with Fire Lord Ozai took nearly everything out of Aang, and by the end, he was nearly defeated. When forced by Ozai's onslaught to enter the avatar state, he chose not to kill the Emperor. Instead, Aang used his newfound energy bending skills to take Ozai's bending powers away from him, rendering the villain alive but utterly defeated. While Aang was fighting Ozai, Katara and Zuko teamed up to take down Azula. While she was attempting to kill Katara, Zuko jumped in front of the lightning she fired, taking the blow himself. Zuko almost died taking the shot, but survived and was eventually appointed the new Fire Lord. Thus, the 100-Year War came to an end, and Avatar Aang brought the first bout of peace the world had seen in some time. In earning victory this way, Aang saved the world and became one of history's most notable avatars. His 100-year absence might have thrown the world farther out of balance than it had ever been before, but he restored it in legendary style by reigning victorious over Ozai. As our heroes entered adulthood, they also entered the world of diplomacy. The war was won, but its aftermath would need to be reckoned with for decades to come. This era is largely chronicled in the Avatar comics, which take place over the course of the handful of years immediately following the TV series' end. In these, we see the origins of Republic City, the multicultural metropolis that would become home to Avatar Korra. Ursa, Zuko and Azula's mother, was also discovered and reunited with her family. Zuko's reign was also disturbed by the actions of the new Ozai Society, a shadowy group that sought Ozai's restoration and Zuko's murder. Even the Southern Water Tribe, long left behind in the march of progress, grew beyond its humble borders into a thriving city. These decades were full of trial and tribulation, but they also saw Aang and Katara marry and start their family. Additionally, Toph established metal bending as a discipline, and the United Republic of Nations was formally created. Approximately 40 years before the events of The Legend of Korra, Republic City fell prey to Yakone, a waterbending crime lord. A canny, calculating man, Yakone was a top-tier waterbender that could use the difficult skill of bloodbending without the added power of the full moon. This skill allowed him to control anyone at any time without revealing himself as the puppeteer pulling the strings. Years went by in which he evaded capture and punishment, expanded his criminal empire, and honed his bending to an ever sharper point. Eventually, however, the law caught up to his tricks, and Aang was forced to remove his bending as he'd once done to Fire Lord Ozai. Despite his loss, Yakone's network was not erased, and he was soon broken out of prison and spirited away to the North Pole. There, he underwent extensive plastic surgery to construct a new face, married, and had 2 sons, Noatak and Tarlok. Yakone trained the boys as bloodbenders, but Noatak, fed up with having his father's desire for revenge forced upon him, ran off into the polar darkness. Yakone's dreams of taking Republic City back through his children died that day, and soon enough, so did he. However, his influence lingered in Tarlok, who would become a Republic City councilman, and Noatak, who would later re-emerge as the fiendish Amon. The decades following Yakone's exile were relatively quiet. When Aang died at the age of 66, the Order of the White Lotus were sent to search the water tribes for the next avatar. Aang and Katara's daughter, Kaya, returned to the South Pole to support her mother, and their son, Tenzin, was left the only living airbender and single-handedly responsible for preserving the Air Nation.
I'm the Avatar! You gotta deal with it!
Korra, who was cognizant of her avatar status from a startlingly young age, was found and placed into a training compound. Throughout her youth, she was prepared for her role as the bridge between worlds. But as the events of The Legend of Korra's first season revealed, that role had changed massively. Society was rapidly industrializing, exposing a schism between benders and non-benders barely examined by Avatar: The Last Airbender. Amon seized this opportunity to lead a sect of anti-bending citizens named the Equalists in an attempt to rid the world of all bending. Korra ultimately made several missteps when challenging Amon, and it even cost her her abilities to waterbend, firebend, and earthbend for a brief period. However, she ultimately stopped him and his followers aside her new friends, Mako, Bolin, and Asami. The threat had passed, but Republic City and Korra were changed forever as a result. As a consequence of the trauma Korra experienced, she unlocked her ability to airbend, managed to connect with the avatars of her past lives for the first time, and gained control over the avatar state. Much changed in the year after Amon's defeat. While Amon and the Equalists presented Korra with an external problem to solve, Unalaq, her uncle and leader of the Northern Water Tribe, brought out her internal conflict regarding her relationship with the spiritual aspect of her position as Avatar. Unalaq turned out to be a schemer interested in seizing power across the physical and spiritual planes, and he manipulated his niece into opening a polar portal to the spirit world. This act sparked a civil war between the water tribes and ultimately undid the work Avatar Wan completed thousands of years in the past. This conflict reached a crisis point when Unalaq freed Vaatu from his imprisonment in the Tree of Time. He merged with the spirit, much like Avatar Wan did with Rava thousands of years prior, and became the world's first Dark Avatar. A thrilling battle ensued between the maliciously empowered Unalaq and Korra, with their spirits projected into Republic City's bay as towering giants of light. Though Korra vanquished the Dark Avatar, Rava was torn from her. While she was ultimately able to reconnect with Rava, the incident severed her connection with the avatars of the past. After the battle, Korra also made the shocking decision to keep the spirit portals open. For the first time in millennia, the spirit and mortal worlds were connected, and the avatar was no longer the sole bridge between them.
Humans and spirits must learn to live together.
With Vaatu defeated, Korra's attention turned once again to humanity and its many concerns. She'd known that keeping the spirit portals open would change the world forever, but no one foresaw just how much it would affect things. With the spiritual and the mortal more closely connected, non-benders found themselves suddenly able to airbend. Bumi, Aang and Katara's only child not born a bender, became one of the show's most prominent new airbenders. Other notable new benders included Toph's granddaughter Opal and a young thief named Kai. Most formidable of all, Zahir, a long-imprisoned radical and admirer of the air nomads, was also given this gift. Zahir promptly used his newfound power to escape his prison and reform his anarchist cell, the Red Lotus. Once his team was reassembled, he set his sights on slaying the Avatar. His path to Korra was bloody and destructive. Seeking to return the world to a more chaotic state, the Red Lotus assassinated the Earth Queen and destroyed the Northern Air Temple. They also poisoned Korra in an attempt to force her into the Avatar state. Once she entered the Avatar state, they'd planned to kill her and end the Avatar cycle forever. Though the Red Lotus were defeated, the world and particularly the Earth Kingdom were left in shambles. What's more, Korra was more physically and mentally shaken by her experience than anything she'd ever undergone before. 3 years passed after Korra's poisoning. Seeking to regain her confidence and skill, she returned home to the Southern Water Tribe where she worked with Katara, lived with her family, and otherwise recuperated. However, the physical and mental trauma from her encounter with the Red Lotus had left a profound impact on her, and she still felt as if something was missing.
Of course I'm frustrated! A crazy man poisoned me, and now I can't dress myself, or cook for myself, or do anything for myself!
She ultimately met up with an elderly Toph, who pointed out that part of what caused Korra's persistently weakened state was that she still had a little poison left over in her body. After drawing out the poison and re-entering the world, she learned to face her fears of powerlessness head-on. While Korra was on the outs, Kuvira, a metalbender of prodigious skill, had formed an army. After 3 years, she had much of the Earth Kingdom under her thumb. She shared Korra's passion, stubbornness, and determination, and the battle that ensued between the two was brutal, culminating in the explosion of a massive weapon that ran on spirit energy. Korra bent the energy itself, establishing a new spirit portal in the heart of Republic City in the process. The cosmopolitan heart of the most modern city around had been joined forever to the spiritual plane, and Korra's final act of the series was to enter it, hand in hand with Asami, ready to enjoy a well-deserved vacation. The story of the Avatar did not end after the credits rolled on The Legend of Korra. In the Korra graphic novels, the story picked up right where the Season 4 finale left off. What's more, the comics weren't afraid to sail the ship so many fans wanted during the show, officially making Korra and Asami a couple. The first volume of their story even had a scene of them coming out to Korra's parents. After they returned from a holiday in the spirit world, Korra discovered the spirits were not happy about the portal that opened up after the fight with Kuvira. When the criminal organization, the Triple Threat Triad, attacked the air nomads guarding the portal, a dragon eel spirit turned their leader Tokuga into a hybrid of human and spirit. With Republic City once again put in danger, Korra and her friends were forced to save their home. In order to take control of the city, Tokuga kidnapped Asami and forced her to build a massive gun for his airship. Thankfully, Korra rescued her girlfriend and Republic City and ended the turf war that followed Kuvira's invasion before the weapon could be used. A few months after Korra defeated Kuvira, Republic City was well on its way to rebuilding, as was the Earth Kingdom. In an attempt to reform his kingdom, the young King Wu instituted the first democratic election in history in the state of Gaoling. Like many first attempts at democracy, it was a complete disaster fraught with so much corruption the Avatar eventually had to intervene. Upon arrival in Gaoling, Korra found trouble with a group of dissidents from the Earth Kingdom led by Commander Guan. The commander entered the election himself and began brainwashing constituents into voting for him. Asami, Mako, and Bolin were brainwashed as well, and it was up to Kuvira and Avatar Korra to fight and defeat Guan for good. In the process of helping Korra and her friends subdue Guan, Kuvira at last redeemed herself.